Hello and welcome to the Michigan CNA State Exam prep course. What we're going to be covering in this section is really just an introduction to the state exam. Just make sure you know everything you need to know to be successful, as well as prepare yourself for the state exam and to pass on the first try. We're going to dive right into it. Let's move on to the next slide. So to jump right into the introduction about the Michigan Nurse Aide State Exam, it is a two-part exam that consists of both a knowledge exam as well as a skills exam. The exam is hosted by Headmaster and TMU, and it is required to take and pass the state exam in order to become a certified nurse assistant in the state of Michigan. Now, obviously, the goal and what we're going to help prepare you for is to take and pass both the knowledge and the skills exam on the first try. But I do want to go over some key things about the state exam just so you have a full understanding of what to expect, the requirements, and how many attempts that you have. So after you take and pass your state-approved CNA class, you are going to have 24 months from the date of your graduation to complete and pass the state exam. You will have 3 attempts to pass the knowledge and skill test portion of the state exam. All right, if you do not complete that testing within 24 months from your completion date of training, or if you fail all 3 attempts, what will happen is you will have to complete and go through your training of a CNA program all over again to have any further attempts at the state exam. So I just want you to be well aware of that it exists, that you only have so many attempts and you have a certain time period to do so. Once again, this course is going to give you everything you need to know to implement and to practice to be able to take and pass that state exam on the first try. The total cost for the state exam is $175, and it is to be paid at the time of booking or scheduling your state exam. So once again, the first time you take it, it's $175. If you have to take any additional attempts, it's going to be $175 per section per attempt. In the event that you were to fail either the knowledge or the skill portion of the exam, you will have to apply for a retest, and you'll have to pay for that portion that you failed before so you can schedule a new exam date. So once again, just want to sort of go over some of the basics here, a quick introduction of what the state exam consists of, some timeline and attempt information here as well. Now what I want to do is sort of jump into what it's going to look like when you go and check in for your exam. So first of all, it's super important that you understand that you must arrive for your confirmed test date and time at the test site at least 20 to 30 minutes before your exam starts. Testing is going to begin promptly at the start time noted, and you need to make sure you're at the test site no later than 20 minutes before the start time to allow yourself time to get checked in with the RN test observer. So for example, if your test starts at 8 a.m., you must be at the test site for check-in no later than 7:40 a.m. If you arrive later than that 20 minutes prior, right, you will not be allowed to test. That's going to be considered a no-show status, and you're going to have to pay for another test date. It's a lot of money. So make sure you give yourself plenty of time to get there to check in for your exam no later than 20 minutes before the start time. If you've never been there before, different routes, traffic, etc., I always recommend planning it there 30 to 45 minutes before the exam. That way you're not feeling rushed. You have time to relax, reset, and feel comfortable and confident when you walk in for your exam as well. One of the many questions that we also get about the exam is, what do I need to wear and what should I show up in? So you should be in full clinical attire. This means you should have scrubs. They can be any color or design. Obviously, make sure they're appropriate. And you need closed-toed shoes. If you have long hair, it must be pulled back. And just as a little note and reminder that you will not be admitted for testing if you are not wearing scrubs attire and appropriate shoes. So don't show up with Crocs. Don't show up with sandals or boots or anything of that nature. Because once again, you're not going to be allowed or permitted for testing. It will be considered a no-show status, and you'll have to pay for another test date, which nobody wants to do. So full clinical attire, scrubs of any color or design, and closed-toed shoes. Think of tennis shoes, something comfortable that you can wear that are closed-toed. Another big thing that's going to be extremely important when it comes to the state exam is making sure you have the correct ID requirements for testing. So it is important to know that you need a United States government issued, unexpired, photo bearing signed form of identification. So some examples of this are going to be a United States government issued driver's license, a state identification card, a U.S. passport. So a foreign passport and passport cards are not going to be acceptable. The only time or exception to that would be if a foreign passport that contains a U.S. visa, that would be acceptable. An alien registration card, once again, that meets all identification criteria. So it means that it has to be unexpired, it has to have a photo, and it has to be signed, right? Tribal identification card, work authorization card, military identification card are all going to work. One thing that a lot of people have tried to do is bring a student ID or a school ID. Those are not acceptable forms of identification for testing. Once again, the list here and all of the information is super important. You're going to have to bring this when you go to the exam. It's part of that check-in process that we sort of just talked about a few slides ago, that you're going to have to bring your U.S. government issued, unexpired, photo bearing, signed form of identification with you. It also is going to be important, I'll touch base about this a little bit more, but that has to match exactly what's in TMU. When you sign up for the state exam, your first and last name have to match exactly what's on your ID requirement as well. To touch base a little bit further on the ID requirements, like I just mentioned, the first and last name listed on your ID that you're going to present to the RN test observer when you go in to check in for your test event must match exactly the first and last names that are entered into the Michigan NurseAid TMU database. So we will go over, in a future lesson in this course, how to apply for the state exam. Part of it is going to be confirming that your demographic information, including your first and last name, is accurate. And when you're checking that, you need to make sure that it's accurately matching your identification. They will turn you away at the state exam if it does not match, and you will not be allowed to test, and you will not get a refund for that. So please make sure you're doing that. Once again, we touch base about it further in this course and remind you there as well. Once again, you will not be admitted for testing if you do not bring the proper valid identification, and make sure your identification is not expired. This is something that some people miss on accident. Just want to make sure we bring it to your attention. A driver's license or a state-issued ID card with a hole punched in it is not going to be valid. It will not be accepted as an acceptable form of ID. Once again, a school ID is not an acceptable form of ID either. And if there is a case where your name does not match, or your ID is not proper or valid, or has a hole punched in it, once again, it's considered a no-show status. You have to reschedule and pay for a new testing event. Now, if you have some form of name change, so marriage, divorce, things of that nature, there's an error in your date of birth or your social security number that needs to be corrected. It's super easy to do. All you have to do is go to TMU. Once again, we cover TMU further on in this, but I just sort of want to go over some of these details now. Is you're going to want to complete the demographic change/correction request form and then upload that. So that form is going to be found on TMU's main webpage under applications. It's before you log into your account, and you'll be able to grab that there, fill it out, and upload it. Just make sure you're following the directions on that form, but super easy. If there's any changes needed, your name's not correct, it was misspelled, there's just an error, isn't matching your ID correctly, etc. This is the form you need to fill out to get it corrected so that you'll be permitted into your test date. This should be done before you schedule your test date as well. All right, now that we've gone over the check-in process, ID requirements, we know that this is a two-part exam, some of those basic information. Now let's dive into the first part of the state exam, the knowledge exam. The knowledge test is going to consist of 65 multiple choice questions. You will have a total of 60 minutes to complete all of these questions. In order to pass, you'll need to score 74% or higher. It is important to note that you have the option to take the knowledge exam in written format, and also adding an audio or oral option to the written format as well. The knowledge exam is going to be on a computer. It is very simple to use. And that audio oral option is there for you if that's something that you feel like you will benefit. And we'll dive into that a little bit deeper further into this slide deck. When you go to check in for the test event, you're going to be directed to read a knowledge test instructions that will be provided in the waiting area. I have a copy of that here in this section for you, so you guys know what to expect, what the directions are going to say. You can read it ahead of time just to feel more prepared and ready for the knowledge portion of the state exam. So the biggest question we get from everybody, what's going to be on the knowledge exam? Like, what kind of topics is it going to cover? How much of each topic? How should I study, etc.? So the knowledge portion of the exam is going to have several different topics. You see them all listed right here on the slide. So aging and restorative care, basic nursing skills, impaired care, communication, data collection, disease process, infection control, mental health, personal care, residents' rights, role and responsibility of the CNA, safety are all topics that we're going to see on the state exam. You'll notice in here that there's parentheses with different amounts of questions in by each topic. So that will be the amount of questions on each topic. So for example, basic nursing skills is going to have 10 questions. That's going to be a heavy topic on the CNA knowledge portion of the state exam. Infection control is going to have 7. We're going to have things like disease process and data collection, impaired care that are only going to have 3 questions. But it's important to note that all of these topics will exist on the state exam, and this sort of helps guide you as you're studying and going through the process to prepare for the knowledge portion of the state exam. You sort of know, what's going to be a little bit heavier, what's going to be a little lighter, and where you should be concentrating your efforts at. Some other things that are important to know about the knowledge exam is that you can complete the knowledge exam at a testing center, so a regional test site, or you have the option of doing it from home. So that remote proctored exam is available. You don't need any prior computer experience at all. Simply use a mouse to select your answers, move forward, etc. We'll go over some screenshots on what it will look like and how you sort of can use what you'll see and how to navigate the knowledge exam as well. It is important to note for the remote proctored exam that you meet all of the requirements, which we'll have listed here in the knowledge exam lesson further on in this course, so that you guys have everything that you need to know to make sure you're qualifying for the remote proctored exam technology-wise, and how to prepare for that and what it will be like as well. We'll touch base there shortly. First, what I want to do is touch base a little bit more on the audio version. So once again, the knowledge exam is going to be on a computer, right? But you have this option to add an audio version. So the audio version of the knowledge exam is going to be where you're able to use headphones, and it will read neutrally to you the questions and the answers. You cannot use Bluetooth connected devices. Once again, it will have to be wired headphones or earbuds that are used. You can pause, rewind, fast forward as needed as well, but some people just feel more confident. They feel like they understand and process the information for the test when something's being read to them. So this is something that you can absolutely do. So if you want to have the audio version available during your knowledge exam, it's really important that you follow this step. So before you schedule your knowledge exam, what you're going to want to do is you're going to log into TMU. Once again, TMU is the company that proctors and sets up the scheduling, payment, etc. results of the state exam. So we're going to log into TMU. You'll have links to all of this. We go through how to apply in TMU further on in this course. But you're logging into TMU. You're going to select your profile. Then under testing preferences, as you can see in the screenshot here on this slide, you are going to click the box that says Enable Audio Testing. Once again, this needs to be done before you schedule your knowledge exam. You want to make sure you finish by hitting Save Changes, and then from there you're able to schedule your oral exam. Once again, just an added benefit for those who want it read to them. So when it comes to the knowledge exam, once again, we have 2 options, the in-person or the remote option. First, I'm going to go over the in-person option in a little bit more detail here. So with the in-person, you're going to be required to present your ID when you enter the knowledge test room, as well as the skills lab for your skills exam, like we sort of talked about. So you're going to need to keep your ID with you throughout the exam day. Once again, it has to be one of the acceptable ID requirements that we went over earlier. What's going to happen once you check in, once you present your ID, the knowledge test proctor is going to hand out materials and give you instructions for taking the knowledge exam. Once again, you'll have 60 minutes to complete 65 questions. You're going to be given a 15-minute warning. So be told when there's 15 minutes remaining. You may not ask questions about the content of the knowledge exam. So, what does this question mean? I don't understand what this word is, etc. They're not going to be able to answer anything about the content on the knowledge exam. The knowledge test portion of your exam is going to be displayed on a computer screen for you to read and key in your answers. Super simple, just as easy as moving your mouse and clicking the correct answer and moving on to next. You're going to need, when it comes to logging in and getting ready to take your knowledge exam, you are going to need your username and email and password to sign in for your knowledge exam. So make sure you have that. I know most of us, you save your password on your computer, your phone when you're logging into things, and you don't always remember which password goes to what, but you are going to need that for the in-person portion of the knowledge exam if that's what you choose to do instead of the remote. So make sure you have that information. Once you log in, the knowledge test proctor is going to provide a code for you at the start of the testing event. So you're going to enter that code to get started. One thing that's really important that I've been asked for some people are, can I use a translator, a foreign language dictionary of any kind to help translate, any information for me from, English to maybe your first language? They are not allowed unless they're pre-approved. If that's something that you need, you'll need to contact TMU to figure out and see if that's something that you can get approved for yourself. I can just tell you based on experience, it really depends on this. I haven't seen a ton approved, but it doesn't hurt to reach out and contact if you feel like that's something that you may need. Now for the remotely proctored knowledge exam. So once again, this is where you take the exam at your house. A lot of people like this because it gives you the option to be a little bit more comfortable. You're in your own space. You're not in this, intimidating testing center that's really quiet. You're in a little cubicle. You have somebody walking around staring at you. So the remote proctored is a little bit more comforting for some. Once again, you can take this, at your home. You have to have a space though, which I will get into here shortly, that is distraction free and you're able to complete this without anybody else in the room. So in order to qualify for the remotely proctored knowledge exam, you have to have an updated version of Google Chrome as your internet browser. TMU does not support Internet Explorer, so Google Chrome has to be available for you. You need to have a reliable Wi-Fi internet connection, a personal computer, a tablet, laptop to log into TMU to access the knowledge exam is also needed. So once again, it could be a computer, tablet, or laptop, as long as you can log in and access TMU and you can use Google Chrome on it. Once again, just like the in-person, you're going to need your email or username and password to be able to log in to the TMU knowledge exam. The remote proctor will also give you a code to start your test. You're not going to be able to start your test without that code from the proctor. You are also going to need a smartphone to access the video conferencing app. For example, sometimes they use Zoom, and you're going to be able to need to download that. So once again, with your smartphone, you're going to be able to need to access that. What will happen is you will receive an email that will be sent to you, also in your notifications in your TMU account, which is going to be important that you check, and we'll go over later more about. And that email and that notification in TMU is going to have information about the video conferencing app, once again, for example, Zoom, that you will need to download before test day. It's going to be important that you follow those directions and complete that before your test day. Don't wait till 5-10 minutes before you're supposed to be on, just in case it takes a little bit longer than you think, you encounter any problems. You want to make sure you're doing that well before your actual test day. The night before your scheduled remotely proctored knowledge exam, you will be emailed along with, once again, a notification to your TMU account a reminder with the password protected link to join the test event. So you're going to have a password you're going to have to enter to enjoy. Well, hopefully you enjoy it because you're going to pass it on the first try, right? But to join the video conferencing app. During the test, your smartphone is going to have to be positioned so that the remote proctor can clearly see you, your keyboard, your mouse if you're using a mouse, and the entire screen of your computer, tablet, laptop. You cannot use any video filters such as a background or blurring your screen at all. They have to be able to see everything. And we'll dive into a little bit more, but you're going to have to show them your whole room as well. So it's going to be important that you're in a place that you feel comfortable doing that you're distraction free, and there's nobody else in the room as well. This is all just to ensure the security of the test, to make sure that you're being honest and using integrity so that you're the one taking the exam without cheating in any way. Once again, this is for the remotely proctored portion of the knowledge exam if this is what you choose to do instead of going in person. To continue on with more information, once again, you must be alone by yourself the entire time while testing. Has to be quiet, isolated, a secured room area, free of distractions and interruptions. No people, children, or pets should be in the room at all. Like I mentioned, you're going to have to show the remote proctor your surroundings, including the entire room during check-in. The remote proctor is also going to ask you to show your room, your entire surroundings at any time during the test. So at some point they could say, show me the room, and you're going to have to use your camera to show them. Once again, to ensure security and making sure you're being honest through the test. If you have selected the audio version of the knowledge exam, you have to provide your own wired earbuds or headphones. Once again, they cannot be Bluetooth connected devices. I know most people nowadays don't have wired earbuds or headphones. So if you are choosing the audio version, please make sure that you have some sort of wired earbuds or headphones that can be plugged in to your computer where you're taking the test. Once again, for the audio, the questions would be read to you neutrally where you can hear them through the wired headphones or earbuds. And they have to be plugged into your computer, okay? You'll be able to, move, rewind, pause, fast forward while taking the audio version as well. Failure to adhere to any of the remote testing conditions that I've described in here would require the remote proctor to stop your test, and then which will be scored as a failed attempt. So please make sure that you're aware of all these things before you sign up so you sort of know what works best for you and that you can meet all of these testing conditions prior to taking the remotely proctored knowledge exam. One other thing that I do want to add that's an important note that they mention that I think is worth mentioning to you guys is on testing day, you will not be allowed to receive any assistance with your setup from anyone in your environment. So when you're in the room, you need to be able to make sure that you can get in all by yourself without the help of anyone else. Not everybody has the same skills when it comes to technology, logging in, using a new app, etc. If you feel like technology is not your best friend or you're worried about this, then maybe going in person to a testing center is going to be a better option for you because you cannot have somebody help you with getting things set up and ready to go. When it comes to scheduling the remotely proctored exam, how you're going to do it is going to be labeled in the how to apply for the state exam lesson here in this course, but it's pretty simple. You're just going to go in, and when you log into TMU to schedule or reschedule a test event, you just want to make sure that you have met all the requirements for the remotely proctored knowledge exam like I mentioned before you schedule it. And then when you go to schedule it, it's going to be listed as the test site location for that knowledge exam will be remotely proctored knowledge test site. So that's how you'll know that you're signing up for that specific test. Once you schedule it, you'll get a test confirmation that will be sent via email and or text. Sometimes they do both. Sometimes it's one or the other. And you'll also get a notification that's generated in TMU. I always recommend you check those. And that's going to give you a test confirmation letter that we'll go over once again furthermore in this course in the how to apply section. There'll be instructions and a link to download the video conferencing app. Like I mentioned, Zoom is a popular one that they use. However, there are others that it could change to. It's going to have the meeting ID and password. All that information is going to be important for you logging in and getting ready for the test site. are for the remotely proctored knowledge exam. All right. If you have any questions, make sure you call Headmaster at 888-401-0462 or concerns in assisting scheduling a remotely proctored knowledge exam. So just wanted to make sure you have this information here for this portion or this part of the exam. Just for an example, this is what it looks like when you go into your notifications in TMU. It will see, remotely proctored test here, knowledge test Zoom link. If you click view on the right side, what you're going to see is it's going to open up an additional pop-up box that's going to have all the information that you need for the remotely proctored knowledge exam. It's going to have your link to the video conferencing app. It's going to have the password, meeting ID, everything that you need is going to be in that notification. You should also have received an email, but if you can't find it for some reason, you've lost it, go into TMU, into your notifications, and this is how you would view that detailed information regarding the remotely proctored knowledge exam as well. Now, just like the in-person knowledge exam, the remotely proctored knowledge exam is going to have a exam instructions, and it's going to be really important that you read them prior to signing in for your knowledge exam. Under the knowledge exam lesson in this course, you'll see the knowledge exam instructions for both in-person and remotely proctored. So once again, based on whichever you choose and whichever is more comfortable for you, that you feel comfortable and confident knowing the instructions and everything you need to know prior to even going there. You'll have a chance to review them again prior to taking them, but just want to make sure they're there and you just have as much information as you can have to really feel more comfortable and confident. Just like the in-person, it's going to be important that you arrive early. Even though you're on Zoom or some sort of video conferencing app, you need to arrive early. So you're going to need to be signed in to that exam link in the waiting room, being ready to be for the check-in process at least 10 minutes before the start time listed on your test confirmation. Once again, I recommend starting the process 20 to 30 minutes earlier. That way, if you have any technical issues, you're having a hard time getting in, putting the password in, whatever it may be, that you're not there at 10 minutes just trying to get in. Once again, if you're not there at least 10 minutes before, they're going to mark you as a no-show and you're going to have to repay for a whole nother test date. It's a lot of money for just not getting in there a little bit earlier. So please make sure you try to sign in, get in that waiting room well in advance, well before that 10 minutes. You don't also want to be, even more nervous, anxious, and worried as you're trying to sign in at the last minute and running into problems. So we'll get there at least 10 minutes early into that waiting room for that remotely proctored portion. You are still going to have to show a form of identification for the remote proctor at check-in before you start your remotely proctored knowledge exam. So have that ready and available for you throughout the whole test event so that you can show the proctor and make sure, once again, it meets all those requirements that we talked about as far as valid identification for the state exam. One thing a lot of students worry about is just navigating the exam, not sure what to expect, what it's going to look like, how easy it is going to be to begin the test, to navigate from question to question, selecting the correct answer, etc. So I'm just going to cover in the next few slides some screenshots and expectations of how to navigate the exam. First of all, everybody's going to have their own login. So when you go to begin the knowledge exam, you're going to log in with either your username or email and password. There's typically going to be a green box that says pending test, and you'll click on begin testing. From there, it's going to take you to a demographic screen where you're going to verify that your name is spelled correctly, that your address is correct, birthday, email address, etc. And then there's going to be a spot to put in the start code that the proctor will assist you with. Once you've had the start code entered and you verified your information, you're going to click information correct, begin test. We're now going to move on to the next slide where I'll cover some more screenshots and more important items on navigating the knowledge exam. Now, this is one of the more helpful slides. It's really going to give you a great view of what it's going to look like here on the knowledge portion of the state exam. There is going to be a countdown of time remaining for you to see, so you're able to watch your own time. That's going to be in the top right corner where you see that number 1. It says remaining, and then it's sort of hard to see the number of time, but you'll be able to see that countdown of time right there. You're also going to be able to see how many questions are remaining for you to answer, and that's going to be where that number 2 is. So in the bottom right-hand corner where it shows questions remaining, so you have a general idea of where you are at and how many more questions you have. So between the time and that questions remaining, it gives you a really good idea of sort of the pace you need to be on to make sure you're able to answer all 65 questions in that 60 minutes. In order to go to the next question after you're able to answer this first one, all you do is select the next button, sort of in the middle right section, bottom half of the screen where the number 3 is. You will also be able to bookmark questions. So say you want to go back to that question, you're not quite sure about it, you want to think about it some more, etc. All you do is check the box where that number 4 is, sort of in the middle of the screen, there in the bottom half. You just select that box and you will be able to go back to that question when you're ready to it. Any bookmark question numbers are going to show up in the bottom left where it says bookmarks, so you can easily go back to them whenever you are ready. You can also jump to any question you want by, in the top left section here where the number 6 is, it says jump to questions. You can type in the number and jump to the question that you want. Lastly, there are some keyboard shortcuts as well. If you see where the number 7 is in the top middle-ish portion of this screenshot, if you click where it says keyboard shortcuts, it should allow you to see different keyboard shortcuts you can use to help navigate the knowledge exam as well. As far as clicking the correct answer when you're taking or answering a question, all you need to do is click on that little white circle to the left of the answer and make sure it's selected, and then go to the next button, which is where the number 3 is. So this gives you a really good idea of how to sort of navigate and what that screen's going to look like, that you can go back and see a bookmark question and go back and answer it, which is great because we get asked that question a lot. So I hope this gives you a little bit more of comfort and confidence going into the knowledge exam on how to navigate this portion. We do have another slide or two we're going to go over that has some more screenshots on here for you as well. Once you reach the last question, what's going to happen is you are going to raise your hand and let the proctor know that you are done. And what's going to happen is the proctor is going to just confirm that there's no questions remaining. So they're just going to check that questions remaining box, make sure that all of them are answered. If there are any left, they're going to remind you and direct you to go back to answer that question. And then the proctor will click on end test typically. Once you select end test, there's going to be a pop-up that opens up and it's going to say, are you sure you want to end this test? By checking the box below and clicking the I want to end this test button, you acknowledge that you are finished taking this test and that you cannot go back. So right there, you're going to click the I understand finish my test box. And then once you select that box on the right-hand side, that's sort of grayed out right now, it says I want to end this test. That will become darker where you can click on it and you will then select that. After you do that, on the bottom screenshot here, you're going to see what it's going to look like after the knowledge test has been ended. So this is the screen that it's going to take you to. Now that you know how to navigate through the knowledge portion of the state exam, this is the most asked question. How do I get my test results, right? We all want to know, how do I find out I passed right away, right? So after you've completed both the knowledge and the skill test portions of the state exam, your test results are going to be officially scored, and then they're also double checked by Headmaster TMU scoring teams. And then the official test results will be available by signing into your TMU account, after 8 p.m. Eastern Time or 7 p.m. Central, the business day after your test event. So if you take the test on Monday, on Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, they will be available for you, okay? If you take it over the weekend, it's the next business day. All right, so to access your test results, what you're going to do is you are going to log into TMU account, and then you're going to click on testing. And then right here on the right hand or bottom screenshot here, you're going to see whether you passed or failed. We know we're going to see pass because you guys are going to do amazing on this. And then you can click the details, right? You can see exactly what you did well on, what you didn't do well on, what you might have failed or passed on. But once again, we're all going to see pass there. Let's put it out there. Let's put in the work and make sure we do. There's also in the top right corner, it says, please take our satisfaction survey. Always great to fill that out. They learn, they take feedback, and they try to make changes based on that feedback. So always helpful for them. If you want to do it, it's not mandatory though. But this is where you're going to see your test results. To see details, I'll go over that shortly with you. And by shortly, I mean right now. So after you go to testing, you're going to see once again whether you passed or failed. We all saw passed. We're going to click details because we want to know how well we did in each category and the details of our exam. And this is what's going to pop up for the knowledge exam. It's going to open up once again, letting you know that you have passed the knowledge exam portion, and it's going to give you your overall test score. All right. So for example, in this screenshot, their overall test score was 86.15%. Then what it's going to do is it's going to break it down by subject. So you're just aware of how well you did in each subject and where you might have struggled a little bit. This is great for you to know, just so you can continue to review so that when you start working as an aide, that, you have improved in the areas where maybe you just didn't do the best, or there's some, room for growth in that area. So great for you to jump in and see here. So I always recommend that each student does that. So this wraps up the knowledge portion of the state exam, all the need to know information, the details, what to expect. We have further on in this, we have a lesson on the knowledge exam, which includes mock exams that you guys can take to help prepare yourself to get ready for that testing environment, the time, etc. So I highly recommend you do as many of those as you can. You can take them more than once as well. All right, now we're going to jump into the skills exam. So what the skills exam does is it really aims to just evaluate your performance when you're demonstrating nurse aid skills tasks, okay? All of the skills tasks or skills that you need to demonstrate are going to be approved through LARA. And LARA is the Michigan entity that really handles all CNA training, testing, etc. So how it's going to look and what's going to happen is for the skills exam, you're going to be asked to perform 3 to 4 skills for an RN test observer. There are a total of 17 possible skills that they can pull from. So there's a list of 17 skills, which we're going to cover what those are here in a few slides. And you are going to be given 3 to 4 of those 17 skills. They're randomly selected. You are not going to know what they are until you walk in the door to take your skills exam. Each skill or task has a scenario associated with them, and that's going to be read to you by the RN test observer immediately before you are asked to do each task. It's going to be really important you listen carefully to the RN test observer, making sure you're listening to all the instructions given by them. You can always ask at any time throughout your skills exam for them to repeat the scenario, and you can ask as many times as you want. Always important to know that. You do have a time limit for the skills exam, and this is something that is really important. They give you plenty of time. It's 30 minutes to complete the 3 to 4 tasks, as long as you go in comfortable and confident and knowing what you're doing, right? If you keep stopping, stalling, not remembering what you need to do and having to think about it consistently, go redo things because you didn't do them, etc., then it's potential you could run out of time. However, most people finish with time left. They do give you a 15-minute warning, so they're going to let you know when half the time is gone and you have a remaining 15 minutes left. To pass the skills portion of the exam, you have to pass all 3 or 4 skills that you get, and the RN test observer is going to have a skills checklist. That skills checklist we provide. You'll see in the skills exam lesson that with each video demonstration that you have in there, there's going to be 2 checklists. One is the RN test observer, and one is one that we've created that's just a little bit more detail that really breaks it down for you a little bit more. The RN test observer skills checklist is going to have some bolded steps in it. Those bolded steps are what they refer to as key steps. You have to pass 100% of all bolded steps. So those are cannot miss steps. It's an automatic fail if you miss a bolded step. All right. So we know we have to get 100% correct on all bolded steps for each skill that we are given. With the remaining non-bolded steps, all right, or what they may refer to as non-key steps, you have to get 80% or better. So they don't expect perfection, right? Bolded steps we need to be perfect on, but the remaining steps in each skills checklist you do not need to be 100% perfect on. 80% or better for each skill. All right. So I really want to highlight that because some people go in feeling like they have to hit every single mark. Now that's the ultimate goal, right? We want to do the best we can to go in and pass our first try, but know that there's a little room for error here too in those non-bolded or non-key steps. Like I mentioned, the nurse observer is going to evaluate performance from a skills checklist. So they're going to be watching you as you demonstrate these skills. There's going to be an actor or actress in the room. The actor or actress is going to be used on all skills except 2 of them where a mannequin will be used. And I'll go over that later in this talk about the skills exam on which skills we use a mannequin for at the state exam. All right. So that RN test observer is going to be watching you demonstrate these skills and checking off, each task as you go through and do them. Just like in the knowledge exam, when you first check in for the test event, you are going to be directed to read the skills test instructions that are going to be in the waiting area for you. We also provide them in this course for you. That way you just, once again, you really know what to expect when you walk in. You're already prepared. You're already ready to go. So it feels a lot less overwhelming, a little less anxious and nervous because you sort of are really well prepared, right? To walk in, you already know what to expect. You know what the instructions are, but you have another chance to read them before you go in, and it's a great reminder as well. So let's dive into, now that we know what the skills exam is, what's on it, sort of what to expect, right? What are the actual tasks? What are those 17 tasks or skills that, I could get? Remember, you're only going to get 3 or 4 of these, but this is the whole list that they can pull from. So apply a knee-high anti-embolic or elastic stocking to a resident's leg is one skill. Assist a resident to ambulate using a gait belt is another. And we go on. Assist a resident with the use of a bedpan, making sure we're measuring and recording urine output with hand washing. We have catheter care for a female resident with hand washing. Denture care, clean either an upper or lower denture. Don or put on PPE, which is personal protective equipment. Specifically for this skill, gown and gloves. Empty a urinary drainage bag. Measure and record urine output. And doff, or which means remove, PPE, once again personal protective equipment, with hand washing. Another skill is dress a resident with an affected or weak side in bed. Assist a dependent resident with a meal in bed. Foot care for a resident on one foot. Modified bed bath, whole face and one arm, hand, and armpit. Mouth care, brushing a resident's teeth. Passive range of motion for a resident's hip and knee. Passive range of motion for a resident's shoulder. Perineal care for a female resident with hand washing. Position a dependent resident in bed on their side. Transfer a resident from their bed to a wheelchair using a gait belt. And the last and 17th potential skill is vital signs. Count and record a resident's radial, pulse, and respirations. So once again, this is the 17 skills that they can pull from, and you will get 3 to 4 of these skills. Now, out of those 17 skills, there are 4 skills that are considered a potential mandatory task. So these 4 that we have outlined here are one of those potentially mandatory skills. So what will happen is each candidate, so you will be assigned one of the following mandatory tasks with embedded hand washing using soap and water as your first task. So the 4 are assisting a resident with the use of a bedpan, measure and record urine output with hand washing. The second one could be catheter care for a female with hand washing. The third one could be donning PPE, emptying a urinary drainage bag, measure and record urine output and remove PPE with hand washing. And then perineal care for a female with hand washing. All right. So one of these 4 will be your first task. So this will be one of your 3 to 4 tasks that you get. These are all potentially mandatory skills. All right. So you will have one of these 4, and then you will also receive an additional 2 or 3 randomly selected tasks out of the 17 I just read on the previous slide. All right. The selected tasks make up your personalized and unique skill test. So everybody has their own unique and personalized skill test. And each skill test is randomly assigned through an algorithm, that is very comparable in overall difficulty. So I just want to make sure you fully understand. There's 17 total skills. There's a bank of 17 skills. For your very first task, you're going to get one of these 4 listed here in these bullet points, and then you're going to get an additional 2 to 3 out of that bank of 17 that you'll have to perform for the RN test observer. So now that we know the potential tasks, a breakdown of the potential mandatory tasks, and how it's all situated, I want to dive into some of the nuances of the skills exam that we get a lot of questions on. One of them is, what if we believe we made a mistake? How do we correct it? Can we correct it? How does that work? It's absolutely okay if you make a mistake. It happens. The state exam is a little nerve-wracking, right? So when you make a mistake, you may absolutely correct it. In order to correct it properly, what you would do is you will need to correct the demonstration by demonstrating, the step or steps on the task you believe you performed incorrectly, or maybe you just forgot to do in order to receive credit for the correction. So you may repeat or correct any step or steps on any task once again in your allotted 30 minutes, or until you tell the RN test observer that you are finished with the skills task. So in order to do this correctly, what you're going to need to do is you need to tell the RN test observer the specific task, which means the skill. So say, for example, we're going to say the bedpan skill. I made a mistake on the bedpan skill, and I am going to correct the step that I rinsed and dried the bedpan. Let's say that's what we forgot to do, right? So what you're going to do is, RN test observer, I made a mistake on bedpan. I forgot to rinse and dry the bedpan. I am going to go grab the bedpan, and you are going to actually have to demonstrate rinsing, drying it, and then placing it back to where it belongs on the supply table or wherever the supplies are stored in that location for the state exam. It is important that you just do not verbalize it, but you actually have to demonstrate it. Once again, you can do this at any point through your 30 minutes. So say you made a mistake on your very first skill you did, and you're on your 3rd or 4th skill, right? And you realize it just popped in your head. It is no problem. As long as you have time left, you can go ahead and correct that mistake, and you have to just demonstrate what that looks like, okay? So make sure you tell them and you verbalize it as well as demonstrating it. So just wanted to give you sort of a reminder on what that looks like. Another example would be, say you tell the RN test observer, I missed locking the bed brakes in the ambulation task. Then what you're going to do is actually lock the bed brakes, and then the correction is going to be made and noted by the RN test observer. It's that simple. So mistakes are okay. It's okay if you forget something or you do something incorrectly. It's more about recognizing it, communicating it, and re-demonstrating it the correct way. To continue on, I just want to sort of remind you that, like I had mentioned, steps that are only verbalized do not count. All steps must be demonstrated to receive credit. It's also important to note that the steps are not order dependent unless the step specifically states something must be done before or after. So when you're looking at the mock skills checklist, all right, you're going through, you're studying, you're just seeing, the steps, what it's going to look like, what the RN test observer is looking at. It doesn't have to be done in the exact order that you see on that checklist. Once again, unless it says that step must be done before or after, it will be specifically highlighted in the step if it has to be in a specific order. Really, ultimately, what this is just telling you is that you can perform the steps in whatever flows for you, how you've been trained to complete the steps, with the exception of those few steps that have before or after in them. All right. For example, in the PPE skill, where we empty, measure, record the urinary drainage bag while putting on PPE gown and gloves and then removing it, one of the steps says candidates must remove gloves before gown. So that specific step is order dependent. We have to remove the gloves before the gown to correctly complete that step and get credit for it. As we continue on, another important note about the skills exam is that when you finish each task, you need to verbally tell the RN test observer that you're finished with that specific task and then move yourself to the relaxation area so that the RN test observer and the actor can set up for the next skill demonstration. So make sure you have your closure. You're telling the RN test observer that you finished that skill and then move to the relaxation area so they can set up for the next task. They set up for those tasks very quickly. There's very little time in between each assigned task. So the quicker that you let them know you're finished and move to the relaxation, the quicker you can move to the next task where they'll tell you the new scenario and get you ready to get started on the next task that you have. At the end of the test, if you've finished all of your 3 to 4 tasks that you've been assigned, right, and there's some time left, typically the nurse evaluator or the RN test observer will say you have X amount of minutes remaining. You have just completed the task. They'll list which ones that you had, and then they're going to ask you, are you finished? This is a time where you can, just do a quick refresh in your head on what you have done, if there's anything that you want to redemonstrate and fix. And if not, then you can say, yes, I'm finished. I'm confident. I've done everything that I've needed to do and I've done it correctly. All right. If you're continuing to demonstrate, right, you haven't finished all your skills, what's going to happen is when the 30 minutes is up, an audible buzzer will sound. So you'll hear some sound, buzzer of your time ending, and the nurse evaluator is going to say that your allotted time has elapsed, and thank you for showing us your skills demonstration today. They will only check the steps that you've completed on whatever task that you're on. So just because you run out of time doesn't necessarily mean that you will not pass. It depends how far into the skill you were in. Were there any key bolded steps that you haven't done yet? Did you would you have gotten enough through that skill far enough to be able to get all the key steps and at least 80% on all the non-key steps, right? So just keep that in mind, but do note that you do have those 30 minutes and you do need to let the RN test observer know when you're done with each skill, and then finally when you're finished at the very end as well. Another big question we get as we continue to move through the skills exam is about equipment. Where is it going to be? Are they going to have it set up for me for each skill? What does that look like? So first of all the supplies are going to be centrally located in the room, typically on a table, a counter, there could be a shelf where it's all set up, but it's all going to be right there for you in the room. The RN test observer is going to show you all the supplies for the tasks that you have and the equipment that's available there. They'll let you know where the linens are. Sometimes they're on the table. Sometimes they're in a different spot like a cabinet or a closet, etc. There's not going to be any supplies in any bedside stands. If there are bedside stands there, once again, they're going to be on a table, counter, shelf, etc. And they'll also show you where some additional supplies like hand sanitizer, gloves, etc. are going to be. So you have everything you need right there in the room with you. They will not have it set up, however, though, where, say, for example, you get mouth care, right? They're not going to have everything you need for mouth care, like, a towel, emesis basin, a cup for them to rinse their mouth, toothbrush, toothpaste. They're not going to have it set up in a spot for you where it's all sort of in one area set up so you just grab those supplies and go. You still need to know what you need for each skill. So all of the supplies are going to be set out on the table, but it's not set up for you for each individual skill. I'd just like to clarify that so you're well aware that you do need to know what supplies you need for each task still. Continuing on with equipment, another big question we get is, what if I don't know how to use the equipment that they have, like how to control the bed, because there's all different types. How do I lock the bed or the wheelchair, etc. So when it comes to this, the RN test observer is going to do a little bit of a demonstration or at least show you not only where all the equipment is, but how to use some of it. For example, how to lock the bed and wheelchair brakes will be shown, especially if you have transfer or ambulation. How to control the bed, lower, raise it, the head of the bed, etc. They're going to show you where the sink is, where soap and paper towels are located. They're going to let you know where the designated toilet for testing is. It could be like a bedside commode, all right? Or it could be an actual toilet, just depending on the setup of where you're taking your state exam. They're going to also point out where other equipment is throughout the testing room, things like garbage cans, linen hampers, the privacy curtain is pulled. So they'll sort of go over a quick brief how-to on the equipment for you, and that's really your time to get familiar with how the equipment works. Lastly, I just want to cover a few other small things about equipment. Is every candidate, whether they trained at the site they are testing at or not, is going to get the same consistent, complete equipment and supplies demonstration. So if you're taking your test where you trained, then obviously you're going to be pretty familiar with some of the equipment there. However, if you haven't, or you're taking it where you didn't train, you're still going to get the same demonstration. So whether you were there or not for training, same demonstration is going to happen with every single test. So every person taking it is fully aware of how to use the equipment. Once again, the equipment and supplies demonstration is going to be your time to become familiar with the items you'll be using in your 3 or 4 tasks. Another little side note here, say there's only one basin on the supply table and you want to use 2 for some reason. All you just need to do is ask the RN test observer for another basin, and another one will be placed on the table for you. Okay, so if you don't see the supply that you need, or you need more than what's put out on the table or wherever they're holding the supplies, you can always ask the RN test observer. Now that we've wrapped up information about the equipment, I want to dive into the recording form. The recording form is really essentially another piece of equipment, but it's going to be extremely important for the skills that require us to measure and record. Those are going to be things like vital signs, where we have to measure and record pulse and respirations, urine output, so for bedpan and measuring and recording the urinary drainage bag. We have fluid intake and food intake for feeding a dependent resident. So these are the times that we're going to need to use this recording form. If we don't write it down, it never happened. So I can't say it enough how important it is that you make sure you grab the recording form and write down your measurements. So this is the exact recording form that you're going to see at the state exam. You're going to write candidate's name, that's your name. So the very top, you're going to print your name. And at the very bottom, you're going to sign it. So once again, it's not your actor or actress's name. It is your name that you're going to write in candidate's name, and you're going to sign candidate's signature. And then whatever skill you have, you can take this form with you. It's typically on a clipboard anywhere you need in the testing room. So bring it with you. So grab it as part of your equipment is my recommendation. So it's there as a reminder to fill it out before you finish. The RN test observer cannot remind you or cue you to write your recordings on the recording form. That is your responsibility, okay? Please make sure that you write it in the correct spot. Don't switch pulse and respirations, right? You're going to be completely off in one of the key or bolded steps for pulse or respirations is being accurate within so many beats per minute or breaths per minute. And if you switch the two, you are definitely not going to fall within that accuracy range that they're requesting. When we record fluid for the state exam, and typically in the real world, we typically always use milliliters. At the state exam, you'll see ml here as a reminder that we're not recording in anything but milliliters. And then food intake, we record in a percentage. So once again, this recording form is absolutely necessary for those skills that require us to measure and record. It is a piece of equipment that will be there for you. You do not need to take a recording form with you to the state exam. They do provide it. And once again, you can take it throughout the room with you as you're completing your tasks. Now, as a reminder for the skills exam check-in, the check-in process is extremely important. All right, making sure that you bring your ID with you. Once again, you're bringing one of those valid IDs that we've already covered in this PowerPoint with you, because you're going to need to show that to the RN test observer at check-in. It does have to match first and last name to what your name is in TMU as well. Before you go in to start, you are going to read through the skills exam instructions. Make sure you fully understand them. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to ask, because once your skill test begins and the timer starts, you're not going to be able to ask questions. So it's really important that you are fully aware and understand all the instructions. Most importantly, and what I see being the biggest problem with some students, is not arriving in time. If you do not arrive 20 to 30 minutes before your exam starts, you will not be let in. So you have to check in no later than 20 minutes. I always recommend get there 30 minutes. That way, you're just giving yourself extra time. You don't want to be anxious or rushed prior to your test. You want to be relaxed, get there early, and feel good to go, right? Your test is going to begin promptly at the start time noted. And once again, if you're later than 20, if you're not there 20 minutes before your start time, they will mark you as a no-show and you're going to have to pay for another test date. Nobody wants to do that. The test is expensive, right? It's $175. So give yourself extra time, especially if it's a place you've never been. You don't know the traffic. You don't know, maybe exactly where you're going once you get there. Some buildings, are larger. There might be multiple buildings at one location. So just give yourself some extra time to get there and get settled. Another thing I want to talk a little bit more in depth about is the relaxation area. You heard me mention it when I talked about letting the nurse know that you're going to finish up you finished your task and you're in the relaxation area while they are getting ready for the next skill real quick. So typically the relaxation area is just 2 chairs that are placed in the skills testing room away from the demonstration work area. So literally just a chair or 2 that are off to the side so you can set off and you're out of the way as the actor, actress, and the RN test observer are getting the next skill or task ready for you. You're going to be directed to go there in between tasks once again so they can set up. And once again, it's really quick, right? It usually takes less than 30 seconds for them to get it switched and ready for the next task, if that even. So just wanted to sort of go over what that relaxation area looked like. Once again, I want you to fully know and feel comfortable and confident with what to expect and what it's going to look like when you walk into the skills exam. Now I want to dive into the role of the RN test observer. A lot of times students think that they can ask questions, that they're going to get a pat on the back and you're doing great and keep it up and you got that right from the RN test observer. But the role is a little bit different than that. The RN test observer should be positive, confident. They should be completely unbiased and professional in their words, actions, and appearance. They're going to remain impartial during testings. They're not going to be giving you pats on the back, keep it up, you're doing great, you've nailed it all type thing. They're going to remain very impartial and unbiased throughout the test, right? They're going to give their complete and full attention to you while you're demonstrating the tasks. They're going to set up the testing environment that will give, you a fair, non-biased, equal opportunity to demonstrate and perform the task that you're given. And they're going to, once again, check your ID before you enter the room to make sure they have the correct person taking the correct test as well. So just a little guide on what the role of the RN test observer is. After your test starts, they're not able to answer questions. So that's important to know, and why I mentioned earlier that you make sure you ask your questions prior to beginning. Now that we've covered the role of the RN test observer, I want to slide in and talk about the role of the actor. So pretty similar, the actors must remain test neutral and not impact the test in any way. So they're not going to start or engage in a conversation with you. They're going to provide the exact same simulation for every candidate. And they cannot answer any questions that would impact the test with anything other than whatever you think is best. So once again, can you do this? They're not going to answer yes or no. Typically, it's going to be whatever you think is best. And that puts the action just back on you. So for example, in the bedpan task, is the head of your bed high enough? If that's what you ask the actor, they're going to say whatever you think is best. It's up to you to make the correct action based on what the checklist is asking or the scenario is asking for in order for it to be correct. So once again, this is the role of the actor during your exam. So you just have a good expectation of what they might say and what it might look like. All right, now that we've covered a good majority of the skills exam, let's talk about the test results, right? Everybody wants to know about the test results. How do I know? When will I know? And what information will I get? So it's all going to be in your TMU account. The official results are going to be available once again in your TMU account after 8 p.m. Eastern Time, the business day after your test. All right, to access your test results, you're going to log into your TMU account, and then you're going to click testing, and then you'll be able to see here whether you passed or you failed, and you're going to be able to click on the details, see the details of your test. We all know we're going to see passed, right? Because we're going to do everything we need to get in there and try to pass our test on the first try. So once again, you can get this in TMU. Everything is officially scored and double checked prior to being entered. So that's why it takes one business day after 8 p.m. Eastern. I'll go over what the details look like specifically for the skills exam. So once you click the details button on the next slide, we'll go over the details here. So what you'll see here is the skills exam test results page. So it's sort of like a letter in a sense. In the beginning, it's going to tell you whether you passed or failed. It's going to say what the pass rate needs to be, which is 80% or better on each skills test without missing any key steps to pass the skills test. So once again, that's the standard to pass there, and that's on each individual skill. You'll also see below that skill exam incomplete steps. These are going to be the steps that you missed on the skills exam. All right. So for example, it looks like this person had denture care, cleaning upper or lower denture. They also had foot care, and they had catheter care for a female with hand washing. So with denture care, you can see they only missed one step. That's great. They just forgot to rinse the denture under cool running water. All right. Means they could have just not rinsed it at all. They could have used a different temperature water, right? So, and then with foot care, they missed a lot, right? They didn't use soap and water. They didn't wash the entire foot or in between the toes. They didn't rinse the foot. They didn't rinse between the toes, dry foot, dry thoroughly between the toes, etc. So the list goes on. Those are all missteps, which would equate to being less than 80%, right? For catheter care, for a female with hand washing, all they forgot was to pat dry. That's not going to cause a fail because they're above 80% and they got all the key steps. And then at the very bottom, in small writing, it says manual skills test failed. And that's going to be foot care, 1 foot. So that is the skill that they failed. And once again, it's all going to be in the details here. So you can see when you're done what that looks like and the details of what was missed, if anything, right? So if you have to retake the test, so if you fail the skills test, one of the tasks on your retest will be a task you previously failed. So for example, in the previous results, foot care on 1 foot was failed. That is going to be on the test that you're retaking, right? It's going to be one of the tasks that you previously failed. The other tasks on your skill test are randomly chosen so that every skill test is comparable in difficulty and average length of time to complete. Just want to keep that in mind. If something happens and you have to retake it, that you sort of know what to expect in regards to what skills you might get. The last thing I want to cover about the Michigan State exam is if you feel the need to have your test reviewed, you don't agree with the results, you can request a review of your test results or dispute any other testing condition. So basically the purpose of this review process is just to ensure fairness and accuracy in the evaluation of your test. They recommend strongly that you call headmaster at the number provided here on the screen during business hours, which is once again 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday, excluding holidays, to discuss the test outcome you're questioning before paying a $25 non-refundable test review request deposit. So in order to request a review of your test, it is a $25 fee that is non-refundable. So that's why they recommend you call to sort of talk through it first, and they can give you a little bit of guidance on what you're disputing and talk through it a little bit before you pay that fee. Once you have further details about the scoring of your test after you talk to them, A lot of times you'll gain a better understanding of the scoring process. However, if you're still, after talking to them, still concerned about your test results, you can absolutely go through and request a review. And you can do this on the TMU page under applications before you log into your account, and click test review request. And you have to do that within 3 business days from the official scoring of your test. All right. So Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays are not business days, but 3 business days from the official scoring of your test, you need to submit that test review request. Late requests will be not denied and will not be considered. And once again, that $25 fee is non-refundable. After you submit that test review request, if that's what you choose to do, they'll do an investigation into your dispute or concerns. And if the review finding is in your favor, you're going to be refunded the $25 test review deposit. If the finding of the review is not in your favor, the $25 test review deposit is going to remain and the fee is non-refundable. So just wanted to lastly just go over that this process does exist if you don't agree with your results or have concerns about the testing process or environment that you are in or any part of the testing condition. Once again, I highly recommend calling and talking to them prior to doing this just because of the fee that's associated with it. But hopefully this isn't something that you have to do. Once again, this completes all of our information on an introduction into the Michigan State Exam. So you guys are fully aware of what to expect, how to properly prepare, and feel comfortable and confident walking into both the knowledge and skills exam.